Good afternoon. So, in some of my recent BBC talks, I spoke about the 9 similes for emptiness that the Buddha mentioned in the Vajra Sutra, this verse that goes through different similes like a star, a mirage, and so forth. And so these are all similes for emptiness, showing how the way things appear to us isn't really how they are. And the last time I spoke about the 4th simile, which is illusion, and I received an email from a student asking a couple of questions about what I said. So I thought today I'll address these questions, or at least start to. I may not finish all of them, because maybe other people have the same questions. So the first question the person asked is, in the analogy of the magic show, how does the third person see things if they don't see the illusion? How does an enlightened being see things? So just to review what I said last time, some of you may not have heard this story before, but there's this story analogy that comes up in the Buddhist teachings about a magic show. Although last week Jay Garfield, during his course, mentioned that this is also in Indian philosophy, so it's probably a very old example, and Buddhism just used it. So the story is of a kind of magician who has the ability to take an ordinary object, like a piece of wood, and do some magic and cause people to see an elephant, something like an elephant or a horse or something. But anyway, just use one example, an elephant. So the people in the audience who are affected by the magic really do see an elephant. Looks like there's a real live elephant there. And they even react emotionally. Some may be excited, wow. Others might be frightened, oh. Some people might even have aversion. Oh, get that stinky out of here. So they react as if there is a real elephant there. But it's not. It's just an imaginary appearing as an elephant, but not real elephant. And the magician who did the magic also sees an elephant, but knows it's not a real elephant. So that person doesn't react emotionally. It's just, oh. And then there's a third person that comes along after the magic was done and therefore wasn't affected by the magic, and they don't see an elephant at all. They just see a bunch of people standing around and a piece of wood. Okay, so there's 3 ways of seeing things in this situation by different kinds of beings in different situations. And this is an illustration for different kinds of beings and how they relate to the world and the things that appear to us. So the first kind of being is probably most of us, if not all of us, ordinary beings who haven't realized emptiness. We are like the audience who are fooled by the magic, who see an elephant and think it's a real elephant. So we are like that in that when we look at things in the world, including ourselves, our own body and our mind and everybody else and everything, we see everything as if it's real, inherently existing, independently existing on its own without depending on anything else. So this is actually a false mode of existence that isn't there, but it's projected by our mind onto things. But we don't know that, so we just think that's how things are. Okay. So we are like the audience, seeing things as inherently existing and believing in that existence and even reacting emotionally. So when something we see something we like, we react with attachment. Something we don't like, we have aversion or fear, and so on. And then we create actions on the basis of that, and that's how we get ourselves into trouble. This is the basic problem that we have, what Jay called primal confusion. Where all our suffering comes from, all the suffering in the world, wars, natural disasters, pandemics, disease, physical disease, mental disease, all these problems originate in this wrong way of seeing things. Yeah. And then there's another kind of person who does realize emptiness, who has realized emptiness directly. Okay, so they've been studying and meditating, and they got to the point where they have a direct, non-conceptual realization of emptiness. And there's a term for that kind of person. It's a Sanskrit word, Arya. So an Arya is someone who has directly realized emptiness. And what happens, they say, when the person is meditating, they're in this deep meditation, looking at emptiness, experiencing emptiness, everything else disappears. All conventional things, even their own body, even their own mind, everything disappears except emptiness. So they're only aware of emptiness during meditation. But then when they finish their meditation, they get up and open their eyes and walk around, things start appearing again. So they see people, the world, houses, buildings, trees, and so on. But they don't see them in the same way as they did before. They're no longer, things, they say things will still appear as if they're inherently existing, independently existing. But they know that that way of existing is false. It's like the magic. It's like the elephant in the analogy. Okay? So the elephant in the story of the magic show stands for inherent existence, this false imaginary mode of existence that isn't really there but does appear as long as we're still ignorant of emptiness. So this Arya, the Arya person, is like the magician, in that they still see inherent existence in things, but they know it's not real. It's not really like that. So they see things with this overlay of inherent existence, but they know, oh, that's not true. That way of existing isn't true. But they still see things. They still see conventional things. Then the third person in the magic show corresponds with the Buddha. So there's different ways of explaining that, but maybe the simplest way is just to say a Buddha. A Buddha is someone who has reached the highest state of mind, mental development. They've totally cleared away all obscurations in the mind. No more delusions, no more obscurations. Everything's been totally purified for their mind. And so it said that, I'm not talking from experience. That's what this person is asking. How does a Buddha see things? Okay, so I don't know. I don't have that experience. But what they say in the teachings is that a Buddha sees all things, all phenomena. So they see the conventional things in the world, people and beings and buildings and houses and trees and so on, all the problems in the world. They see all of those things, but they don't even have the overlay of inherent existence, the appearance of inherent existence. That's totally gone. That's totally out of the way. And they see, simultaneous with seeing all conventional things, they also see emptiness. So they see everything as empty. They understand both conventional things like people and beings and worlds, and the emptiness of all of those things correctly, without any mistake. So a Buddha then is like the third person in the magic show who comes along and doesn't even see the elephant because their mind was not affected by the magic of the magician. So they just see a bunch of people there and a stick, but no elephant, no false appearance of anything. So that's probably hard to understand, especially since we're not enlightened. They say to really understand what an enlightened being experiences, you have to be enlightened yourself. So we can just talk about it and think about it and try to imagine it, but to really know what it's like is quite difficult. But in a way, that's why that story, the magic show, is helpful, to understand that there are these different ways of seeing the same situation depending on what's happening in the person's mind and how much understanding they have and so on. But it's good that this question came up because it said historically there were some Buddhist teachers, masters, writers who had the idea that a Buddha doesn't see conventional truths. A Buddha only sees emptiness. And there may even be people like that today in, contemporary Buddhism, people who make that kind of assertion. Oh, a Buddha doesn't see the world, a Buddha doesn't see sentient beings, a Buddha only sees emptiness. So you kind of have this idea of a Buddha just sitting there, his mind just totally in space, space of emptiness, ultimate truth, and totally away from the world, beyond the world, and so on. So, according to our tradition, the teachings that we have been learning, that isn't the case, fortunately. Because if you think about it, I mean, if a Buddha didn't see conventional truths, that means the Buddha wouldn't see us. He wouldn't see any of us sentient beings who are suffering. He wouldn't see our suffering. He wouldn't see our physical suffering, our bodies and our sickness and so on. He wouldn't see our mental suffering. He wouldn't see the world and all the problems in the world. None of these things would appear to the Buddha. So if that was the case, how could the Buddha help us? If the Buddha didn't see us, how could he help us? So we'd be sort of lost without the Buddha seeing us and understanding us, knowing what we need and being able to help us. Also, words are conventional things. They are part of conventional truth. So if a Buddha had no awareness of conventional things, conventional truths, the Buddha wouldn't be able to use words. He wouldn't be able to speak. And if a Buddha didn't speak, we'd have no teachings. We'd have no Dharma. And if we didn't have the Dharma, we wouldn't be able to learn the Dharma, study, meditate, practice, and find our way out of samsara. There'd be no path for us to get out of suffering. So that would be really bad. We'd be stuck forever in samsara with no way out. And the Buddha's up there in this wonderful state of mind, just seeing emptiness. So anyway, that is what our teachers say, that a Buddha, it isn't the case that a Buddha doesn't see the world, doesn't see conventional things, but a Buddha does see all of us and all of the things in the world, but sees them correctly. He sees everything in a correct way without this mistaken appearance of things being inherently existing, independently existing, that false overlay. So I hope that's clear, and like I say, there are a few other questions a person asked, but I'll leave those for another time. But this is an important point, and it is difficult. It is really difficult to understand this analogy of an illusion and what it actually means. Because again, what sometimes some teachers and books say everything is an illusion rather than everything is like an illusion. Do you see the difference? It is different to say things are an illusion, because that connotes things don't exist at all. They just appear, but they're not really there. On the other hand, if we say things are like an illusion, which is what this verse says and what our tradition says, things are like an illusion, that means they are similar to an illusion, but not exactly the same. The way in which they are similar is there's some false way of things appearing to us. Things appear to us in a false way. So we have to peel away that false appearance, and then we can see things as they are. So that's why it's important to understand in the analogy, the elephant doesn't stand for conventional things, the world and sentient beings and so on. The elephant stands for a false way that we see things, inherent existence. So we want to get rid of that and just see things as they are. So I hope that's clear, and I'll probably continue talking about this next week because there may be other questions as well. Any questions from anyone here? Yeah, we heard a lot about magic shows and elephants and last week's course. It is a helpful analogy, but it's a very difficult point to fully understand. So don't give up if you find it difficult to understand emptiness and these analogies and so on. It is difficult, but we have to keep listening, learning, thinking, meditating, discussing, and gradually it does become more clear. I promise. Thank you.